On Thursday, the 7th of May 2015, there will be a general election in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which will shape the country's foreign and domestic policies for the next 5 years. This video will briefly explain how the UK electoral system works, which direction each party wants to take the country, what a breakdown of their policies looks like, and why you should vote, even if you feel disillusioned with government. The idea here is to clearly explain what the goals and policies of each party are so that people living in Britain can cast a more informed vote and the rest of the world can better know the sometimes incomprehensible British political system. How the UK system works. The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy without an actual written constitution, which uses a parliamentary system of governance consisting of an upper house, the House of Lords, and a lower house, the House of Commons. Only the lower house is presently democratically elected, with members of the upper house being appointed by the reigning monarch. In recent years, there have been some major changes to this system, which includes the requirement for members of the House of Lords to earn rather than inherit their seat, the establishment of a Supreme Court in 2009, and the introduction of fixed election dates from 2015 onwards. Previously, it was the House of Lords which performed the functions of the new Supreme Court. Elections could be called at any time if the governing Prime Minister felt it was politically judicious to do so, and the then burgeoning 1,300-member House of Lords could pass down seats and titles amongst themselves in what amounted to an unelected aristocracy. Other proposed restructuring, such as the replacement of the current majoritarian system with a preferential voting system, and also a proposal for the total independence of Scotland, both failed by referendum in 2011 and 2014 respectively. So how does a general election work? The United Kingdom is presently divided into 650 constituencies across 4 countries, and a tidy mess of political parties. A mess because there are so many, including a few joke parties, but tidy in so much as the largest 3 of these tends to comprise upwards of 95% of Parliament. During a general election, each of these 650 constituencies elects 1 representative to Parliament from a list of local candidates. Not every party is able to field a candidate in each constituency, so depending on where you live, some parties might not even appear on the ballot. The Scottish National Party, for example, doesn't have any candidates outside of Scotland, though there's no actual rule preventing them from doing this, and the Christian People's Alliance are only standing in 17 seats. Each elected representative from these 650 constituencies then becomes one of the 650 members of Parliament that makes up the House of Commons. But this value is not fixed, and constituency boundaries are frequently redrawn between elections. As a result of the 2010 election, the current Parliament is structured as follows, with 302 Conservative, 256 Labour, 56 Liberal Democrats, 6 members of the Scottish National Party, 3 from Plaid Cymru, 2 from UKIP and just 1 Green, with the remaining 24 from various parties across the UK. Per country, the MPs are approximately proportional to population, with 533 from England, 40 from Wales, 59 from Scotland and 18 from Northern Ireland. So then who becomes the Prime Minister? The reigning monarch actually picks the Prime Minister, who is usually, but not necessarily, the leader of the party with a majority of elected candidates. This has 2 very important ramifications. First, during a general election, voters are not directly electing a Prime Minister, and because the party leader must be a member of the House of Commons, thus be elected in their own right, it's even possible that the leader of the party which wins the general election can lose their seat. Second, the Prime Minister can change at any time without another general election, either by resignation, party revolt, or dismissal by the reigning monarch. This is why it's so very important to vote for a party's policies and not its leader. So let's take a look based on their 2015 manifestos at what these party policies are, starting with the economy, and what each party's proposals are for taxes, childcare, benefits, jobs and housing, each of which have been structured around reducing the national debt and deficit. What are the national debt and deficit? There are 3 key concepts here. The national debt is the amount of money that the UK owes to investors. The deficit, or sometimes surplus, is the difference between the UK's expenditure and its revenue, thus the amount by which the debt is growing each year, and the interest is the yearly cost of borrowing to the UK economy. Interest is affected by debt, and debt is a function of deficit, so manifesto promises to balance the books are party proposals for creating a budget surplus in order to reduce the national debt and so reduce the yearly cost to the UK economy. The national debt, represented here as a function of nominal GDP, usually increases from high spending during wars and financial crises, and lowers during longer periods of recovery. The UK had a surplus every year from 1947 to 1974, shown here by Office for National Statistics data, and is currently in deficit with a steadily increasing debt but a fluctuating cost to the economy at 2.5% of GDP, or £45.7 billion per year, as of 2015. Most parties want to cut the deficit whilst simultaneously investing in education, healthcare and infrastructure. So let's see what they propose, starting with taxes. As it currently stands, everything someone earns up to £10,600, known as the personal allowance, is free of income tax, after which taxes are set at 20% of everything earned up to £42,000, which is known as the 20p tax rate, as in 20p on each pound. Then it's 40% on the income earned after this up to £150,000, and 45% on any earnings after that. In addition, people contribute 12% of their £8,000 to £42,000 yearly income to national insurance, and 2% after that. So for the following wages, this is what you currently pay in tax. So how are the different parties proposing to change this? The Conservatives want to increase the untaxed personal allowance to £12,500 and increase the threshold for the 40p tax rate to £50,000, thus reducing taxes for all. The Greens would like to see a higher tax rate on the wealthiest, increasing the top tier to 60p, in addition to removing the 2% cap on national insurance contributions for people earning above £42,000. These increases are designed to try and reduce the disparity between high and low earners to a ratio of 10 to 1. Labour wants to increase the top tier rate to 50p and somehow reinstate a 10p tax, but they've not released any further details and so we're left guessing. They probably intend to reduce taxes on lower earners and increase them on very high earners. The Liberal Democrats, like the Conservatives, would also like to increase the personal allowance to £12,500, but they're not proposing any significant changes to the taxation of the more wealthy. Plaid Cymru supports the 50p tax rate and, much like the Greens, also proposes to reform national insurance contributions. They want to raise the contribution threshold from £8,000 to £10,600 and raise the 2% cap to £100,000. This results in substantial tax cuts for low earners and higher contributions to social security from the wealthy. The Scottish National Party backs a 20% increase to the personal allowance, bringing it to £12,720, in addition to the 50p tax on higher earnings. The result is modest tax increases on the wealthiest and substantial cuts for lower earners. And finally, the UK Independence Party is proposing to raise the personal allowance to £13,500 and the introduction of a 35p tax rate starting at £43,500, which would push up the 40p threshold to £55,000. This results in tax cuts for all, with substantial cuts for lower earners. Other tax policies proposed by these parties are approximately in line with these philosophies. Next, let's take a look at childcare. The Conservatives would provide 30 hours of free childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds with working parents. The Greens plan a system overhaul with the introduction of a free and universal childcare and education service available for all children aged 5 and under. Labour guarantee 25 hours of free childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds, and that primary school care will be available from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The Liberal Democrats aim to provide 20 hours a week of free childcare for all 2 to 4-year-olds and introduce tax-free childcare for other ages. Plaid Cymru would improve the availability of childcare for children with disabilities and aim to provide flexible and affordable childcare in Wales. The Scottish National Party supports 30 hours a week of free childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds, along with the provision of childcare for the most deprived 2-year-olds. And finally, the UK Independence Party would retain the current 15 hours a week of free childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds, extended to 2-year-olds whose parents are on certain benefits, but initiate a full review of the current system as they feel it is unsatisfactory. On the topic of benefits and welfare, there's a swirling vortex of proposals that aren't easily categorised. Reduce the maximum household benefits to £23,000 a year is what's being proposed by the Conservatives, with UKIP saying it will support a lower cap on benefits. Labour will keep the household benefit cap and ask the Social Security Advisory Committee to examine if it should be lower in some areas. On the other side of the spectrum, the Greens would remove the cap on benefits. Freeze benefits for working-age people for 2 years is also on the table for the Conservatives, while a 1% cap on increases to working-age benefits until the budget is balanced is being proposed by the Liberal Democrats, and Plaid Cymru plans to oppose cuts to in-work benefits. Labour is proposing to cap child benefit rises for the next 2 years, while UKIP would limit child benefits to 2 children and also stop child benefits for children who live abroad. Repeal the bedroom tax, which was introduced by the coalition government and reduces housing benefits for those with vacant rooms, is proposed by the Greens, Labour, Plaid Cymru, the Scottish National Party and the UK Independence Party, while the Liberal Democrats would rather reform the bedroom tax to make it only apply to those who both don't need the extra room and have been offered an alternative. The Liberal Democrats would also introduce a yellow card system for incorrect benefit claims, as opposed to direct sanctions. The Greens would end work for benefits programmes and ensure that work and voluntary training opportunities are available, and instead the Conservative and Labour plan is to replace job seekers' allowance for 18 to 21-year-olds by a youth allowance. For the Conservatives, this would be time limited to 6 months, after which young people will have to take an apprenticeship, a traineeship, or do daily community work for their benefits. For Labour, it would be dependent on recipients being in training and targeted at those who need it most. The Conservatives would also stop automatic entitlement to housing benefit for 18 to 21-year-olds. The Greens would set up a living rent commission to explore controls on rental prices. Protection of state pensions with guaranteed yearly increases is being proposed by the Conservatives, Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish National Party, whilst Plaid Cymru says it will ensure a living pension for all, though Labour is proposing to remove winter fuel allowance for wealthy pensioners, and the Liberal Democrats want to remove winter fuel allowance and free TV licences for pensioners on the 40p income tax rate. And what about jobs to reduce the number of people requiring benefits? The Conservatives are planning to create 3 million new apprenticeships. The Greens have an ambitious plan to increase the minimum wage to £10 per hour. Labour wants to increase the minimum wage to £8 per hour, in addition to providing a starter job for young people who've been unemployed for more than a year, which they will have to take or lose benefits. Labour also plans to guarantee an apprenticeship for every school leaver who attains the grades. The Liberal Democrats say they would double the number of businesses hiring apprentices. They'd also ask the Low Pay Commission to look at ways to increase the minimum wage and encourage the use of a living wage. Plaid Cymru wants to continue promoting apprenticeships whilst increasing the minimum wage to a living wage. The Scottish National Party would support measures to extend the living wage and increase the minimum wage to £8.70 per hour. They also promised to deliver 30,000 new apprenticeships each year in Scotland. And UKIP wants to introduce apprenticeships at a younger age, partially replacing GCSEs for some students. In addition, all parties have proposed measures to ban 0 hours contracts. When it comes to housing, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around. One party even claims in its manifesto's immigration section that to meet demand we must build one home every 7 minutes, which misleadingly makes this goal sound unattainable. But a house every 7 minutes is just 75,000 homes a year, so keeping that in mind, how many new houses are each party planning to build during their time in office? First of all, Plaid Cymru doesn't seem to have a specific target. The Conservatives are planning to build 200,000 starter homes with a 20% discount for first-time buyers under the age of 40. 200,000 over 5 years is 40,000 per year. The UK Independence Party aims to build 1 million new homes on brownfield sites by 2025. 1 million over this 10-year period is 100,000 per year. The Greens aim to build 500,000 social rented homes by 2020. 500,000 over 5 years is 100,000 per year. The Scottish National Party supports a target for 100,000 new affordable houses per year. Labour wants to reach the target of building 200,000 homes per year by 2020. And the Liberal Democrats top that by aiming for 300,000 homes per year. Though it's worth noting here that according to the Confederation of British Industry, the peak build rate attained in the last 5 years was only 219,000 per year. So this value might be a little optimistic. The National Health Service. First of all, a little context. A 5-year plan report was recently released by the boss of the NHS, detailing that there would be a £30 billion per year shortfall in funding by the end of the next Parliament, but that he believes £22 billion per year can be achieved in savings, leaving a requirement for £8 billion per year in additional government funding above inflation for NHS England. Also relevant here are private finance initiative contracts, which are a way for the NHS to get private investment, underwritten by public funds, in order to expand its services without the need for immediate public funding. This was first introduced by Labour, but has been criticised mainly for allowing debt to be placed off the balance sheet, thus not appearing on the government's finances. It has also been branded as privatisation of the NHS by some, as it is in effect a public-private partnership. And finally, the Health and Social Care Act, which was passed in 2012 and opposed by the British Medical Association, extensively restructures NHS England and prompted renewed concerns over privatisation. A 2015 review of the Health and Social Care Act found that the top-down reorganisation has been hugely damaging to the NHS, but that claims of mass privatisation are exaggerated. So what are the different parties proposing to go forward? The Conservatives will fund the £8 billion shortfall predicted by the 5-year plan report. They also plan to make it possible to see a GP 7 days a week and want Britain to lead the world when it comes to fighting cancer and dementia. The Greens have a plan to immediately increase NHS funding by £12 billion per year, growing to £20 billion per year by 2020. This would provide free dentistry and free prescriptions in England. They would counter privatisation of the NHS by scrapping the Health and Social Care Act and any further PFI contracts. They would also promote local community health centres for rapid access to healthcare and would have an emphasis on mental health. Labour plans to commit to spending an additional £2.5 billion per year on the NHS. They will aim for GP appointments under 48 hours and for cancer tests to be processed within 1 week. They will also counter privatisation of the NHS by scrapping the Health and Social Care Act in favour of a preferred supplier system with a cap on allowed profits. The Liberal Democrats will also match the £8 billion shortfall predicted by the report. They will expand evening and weekend opening hours for GPs, and aim to provide therapy in under 18 weeks for conditions such as depression. The Liberal Democrats want Britain to lead the world in mental health research. Plaid Cymru will vote against any further privatisation of the NHS and will support moves to restore it to a fully public service whilst recruiting an extra 1,000 doctors in Wales. They will also support campaigns for public and mental health awareness. The Scottish National Party plans to match the £8 billion shortfall predicted by the report, £2 billion of which are earmarked for NHS Scotland. They also plan to vote against further privatisation of NHS England and will support moves to restore it to a fully public service. The UK Independence Party plans to commit an extra £3 billion per year to the NHS and will stop further uses of PFI contracts. They will also have a focus on mental health and dementia. All parties plan to integrate healthcare and social care in order to focus on prevention and better care conditions. Education is hugely important to the future of the United Kingdom, and each party has their own plan to improve the system. The following points cover the system in England, as there are variations in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but the basic principles are the same. Currently in England, children are first prepared for SATs. These are standardised assessment tests, which aim to provide a benchmark for children's progress relative to pupils of the same age across the country. Students have to take these at ages 6, 10 and 13. They will then move on to a General Certificate of Education, typically to be taken by age 16, after which compulsory education ends and a student may pursue an apprenticeship or advanced levels followed by university. There are also many different types of schools in England, including private schools, community schools, grammar schools, academies, and free schools, to name a few. Private schools don't need to follow the national curriculum, but account for a minority of students. Community schools are administered by local councils. Grammar schools can pick students based on ability. Academies are a Labour initiative to reform underperforming schools by being directly administered by the government. And free schools are a coalition initiative which extends the Academies programme to allow parents, teachers and organisations to set up their own schools. So what will each party do with this system? The Conservatives plan to invest £7 billion in schools over the next 5 years. They want to turn every underperforming school into an academy and deliver free schools where they're wanted. They also want to put an emphasis on mathematics, engineering, science and computing skills, whilst having no cap on university places. The Greens would have a free universal early education programme, as explained in Childcare, and would oppose free schools and academies. They plan to abolish SATs and league tables, end the marketisation and outsourcing of education, and limit class sizes to 20, whilst also restoring the education maintenance allowance for 16 and 17-year-olds. They would also have compulsory age-appropriate sex education for all schools, and change the university landscape by reintroducing block grants for universities, and scrapping tuition fees along with currently owed student loans. Labour will protect the education budget so that it rises with inflation. They will also limit class sizes to 30 for 5 to 7-year-olds and have a technical baccalaureate for 16 to 18-year-olds. They plan to end the Coalition's Free Schools programme and drop university fees to £6,000 per year. Labour will introduce conditions for private schools receiving state subsidy, thus ensuring they contribute to state education as well as private. Finally, like the Greens, they will implement compulsory age-appropriate sex education in all schools. The Liberal Democrats will also protect the education budget and implement compulsory age-appropriate sex education in all schools. They, however, plan to have a core curriculum set by an independent body and review higher education finance in order to consider any necessary reforms and ensure equality of access. They'll also aim to direct more money towards disadvantaged school children in early learning settings and are planning to offer a 2/3 discount on local bus fares for 16 to 21-year-olds to help with the cost of commuting. Plaid Cymru wants to provide an additional year of schooling for 3 to 4-year-olds. They plan to set learning outcomes, but give freedom to schools on how they achieve these goals. They want to emphasise foreign languages by having a compulsory GCSE and introducing language in primary school. They'll also continue to oppose the free school system implemented in England and plan to provide subsidies for Welsh university students studying in Wales. The Scottish National Party plans to maintain free university tuition in Scotland and continue to charge tuition to students from England, Wales and Northern Ireland, though they support a reduction in fees across the UK. They also plan to extend the availability of the education maintenance allowance and continue to build and refurbish schools. The UK Independence Party would end performance-related pay for teachers and stop Stage 1 SATs for children aged 6 to 7 in order to discourage teaching to the test. UKIP supports age-appropriate sex education, but is quite clear that this would not apply to primary school children. Finally, they would promote sciences, technology, mathematics and engineering by scrapping student loans for those students after they have worked 5 years in a related job, and would allow universities to charge international student fees to students from the European Union. Europe. The European Union is a political and economic union of 28 countries which represents 7.3% of the world's population at 500 million people and 20% of global GDP at $16.6 trillion per year. It was created in 1958 as a federal solution to the kind of extremist nationalism that wrought the devastation of the Second World War and was built upon a prior union of European industries. Since the 1992 Maastricht Treaty, we are all European citizens and can vote in European elections. We also have the right to live, work and contribute to the economies of any member state we choose to. The general idea today is that it becomes economically more favourable to buy and sell within the EU market, and so the member states develop each other's economies rather than solely exporting growth to outside nations. Regarding the EU, this is what the various parties are offering. Labour and the Scottish National Party appear satisfied with the current system and wish to maintain the UK's position in the EU. The Green Party, Liberal Democrats and Plaid Cymru are all resolutely pro-Europe, but do also want some reforms. Plaid Cymru wants to discuss how the EU will evolve going forward. The Liberal Democrats take this one step further by proposing a referendum in the event of, quote, martial transfer of sovereignty, end quote, and the Greens actively support a national referendum on EU membership, as they believe many things have changed since joining. The Conservatives are proposing a future referendum on membership, but only after attempts to reform the current system. Finally, the UK Independence Party wants out and would hold the referendum as soon as possible. So who is voting in this election? About 81% of the UK's population is eligible to vote, and only about 85% of those people are registered to do so. This 85% of 81% is therefore the maximum turnout and the 100% baseline by which voter turnout is measured. This is how the eligible voters are distributed between each country, and this is how many registered voters participate in elections. In the 2010 election, only 65% of registered voters, which is 55% of those eligible, actually voted, which is crazy. To put this into context, the Conservatives were elected in 2010 with 10.7 million votes, which is 36.1% of the ballots cast, or just 24.2% of registered voters, meaning that the remaining 35% of registered but non-participatory voters could genuinely swing an election were they not so apathetic. So vote, and do so based on policy, not personality. Thanks for watching.